First, let's cover the imports. Here are the imports you will need for sequential file access. Of course, they all come from the I/O package, and you could just wildcard it, but you'll need file, file input stream, file output stream reader, print stream, buffered reader, EOF exception, and I/O exception. First, take a look at the imports we're going to need for sequential file access. So all of these items here, buffered reader, end of file exception, file input stream, file output stream, I/O exception, input stream reader, and print stream. Alternatively, it's probably a lot easier if you simply wildcard it. In other words, you could simply say java.io.asterisk, and that would take care of all of this. But this is the way that NetBeans does it, one object at a time, instead of wildcarding it. And again, you'll need something for input, so you could use a scanner object, a line number reader object if you want to implement the try and the catch with the line number reader, or you could use a JOption pane and show input dialog. Now let's take a look at reading and writing single objects sequentially. The basic process to write to a file sequentially is, first create a file object, then create a file output stream object, third create a print stream object, and fourth print the data to the file with a delimiter. In this example, we're going to use a line. Remember, I/O processes should always be enclosed within a try block, and for each I/O process, you should catch an I/O exception. Note, when you take one I/O object and pass it to another as an argument to provide additional filtering, buffering, and monitoring, it is known as chaining the streams. So let's take a look at sequential file access, and this time, how do you save a single class of objects sequentially? So we're going to look at this function here. We'll select this, save person sequential, and it simply calls save person sequential. So let's go take a look at it. Down here in the navigator pane, we'll warp over to it. We select the person and we call our function select person. Remember, that just takes care of validation for us, making sure that things are numerically within a valid range and that they're actually numbers and not some weird string that's not a number. So we take that. It will return some valid value to num. Okay, and then let's just, because we're paranoid, I guess, let's make sure the object's not null, but it might be just a good cautious thing to do before we decide to get into all this. Now, any kind of file access is a basic I/O operation, and therefore it has to be or needs to be within try and catch blocks. Okay, so the kind of exception we'll always catch is going to be an I/O exception, at least with sequential file access. So what are the things that we're going to do here? We have to instantiate a file object, and it's just going to be based on the currently selected object's name with an extension of person. Okay, just be a plain Unicode or ASCII text file that we're going to create and stream data to. Then we have to instantiate a file output stream object, and we pass in the file object as an argument or parameter. Then we have to build an instance of the print stream object, and we pass in the file output stream object, okay, as an argument. And once we do that, we can, call print line just as if we were doing system out print line. However, instead of sending it to the console, it sends it to the file. And a line is our delimiter. That's why we're using print line. Or otherwise, we could use something else, commas, semicolons, and instead of print line, we could use print if we wanted to. We just call the accessor method. And so ID, name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, and references. And so we're kind of, manually serializing things sequentially or, via Unicode and ASCII text. Now, when you do it this way, it's very important to remember that you have to read things back in exactly the same order that you wrote them. You don't want to get things out of order or you'll have all kinds of horrible problems. So later on, when we get to loading the object, we have to make sure that we load it back in the exact same order. Okay. Finally, we want to close, in this case, our print stream and our file output stream objects. Don't want to leave them open in case something were to happen, lost power or something like that. We wouldn't want corrupt data. So when we're not using those, we should close them out and not keep them open unless there's a reason to keep them open. And then, okay, if something, if for some reason the object is null, we're just going to say, hey, you cannot save nothing. This is a double negative there, but hey, whatever. And then we just need to catch our I/O exception if there's a file access error, not enough room, no permission, can't find the file, can't make the file, whatever. Things that could go wrong. We'll just catch that I/O exception. Okay, so let's test that. We will test it. And we're going to simply add a person. And all right, so Charles, Germany, and Link's my personal best friend, I swear. No. All right, so there I am, and now I'm going to go ahead and call the function, save a person, sequential. And it's just, it's going to ask me, choose a person to save. Currently one person in the database, current record. I'm going to go with the current person. I could either type in 1, or if I hit Q, since that person is currently selected, I could do that as well. Either way. File saved successfully, okay? So, everything is closed, and we'll quit. And let's go take a look at that, okay? So, here is our file now. This is, in the project folder in NetBeans, but wherever I was, running the class from. And if I open this up in Notepad, it's just plain old ASCII text, but you can see, there's the ID that was assigned to me. There's my name. This is all the field data in the person class. My age, my size, my weight, my occupation, my location, and my references. Okay, and then there's just, as delimiter, it's a line, so there's a little line there. So here's our text file. The basic process to read from a file sequentially is, first, create a file object. Second, create a file input stream object. Third, create an input stream reader object. Fourth, create a buffered reader object. And finally, read the data from the file with the readLine method. Remember, all data streams into the buffered reader object as string data via the readLine method. Therefore, if the object requires different data types, such as int, double, and boolean, the string data must be parsed and converted to the correct data type. Okay, what about the next function? If we go back to main, let's take a look at the load person sequential function, all right? And if we look at that, what does that do? Or how does that, change? Load person sequential, in this case, I have to use a file object. And after the file object, I need to make sure that I can find it, or that I give it the the correct name. So I would probably if this was a JFrame, or if this were a JApplet, I'd probably use a file chooser object and just have a little browse box open up and they can browse the hard drive. But it's not, it's console, so we're a little bit limited there. So what we can do is we'll simply take input via our scanner object and assign it to a string. And we'll just tack on the file extension. We'll concatenate. So what I have to type in is Charles Germany, or Charles space Germany, and then the file extension will be tacked onto it for me. Okay? Data stream object, the same, file input stream is just like a file output stream. Notice the the way things are connected here, sort of like the the what is it, the elbow connected to the, I don't even know that, but notice how things are set up, or how they're connected. You see the pattern. So again, a file object, that goes in as an argument to the file input stream object. The file input stream object goes in as an argument to the input stream reader object. And there's a fourth object, and that is the input stream reader object. Input goes in as an argument to the buffered reader object. Okay? And I'll talk about the imports last. They're up at the top there. But you just, obviously, if we're using these items, we have to make sure we import them. File output stream, print stream, file input stream reader, buffer reader, all of these would need to be imported. And of course, you could just use a wildcard it, use the asterisk and import all of the whole Java IO package. Or you can do it the NetBeans way and import them one item at a time, either way. But these are objects. It is IO, so just like when I'm saving or writing an object, when I'm reading, it has to be inside of try and catch blocks. A lot can go wrong when you're doing IO. And the kind of exception you have to catch is an IO exception. Okay? So we go through this, and we're going to try it, and we need to make sure that we haven't exceeded the maximum number of elements we can store in our database. So that's all I'm checking for here, okay? And if we have, we don't want to let them exceed or go past it, so we'll say database is full. Otherwise, let's go ahead and we want to read the items in. And remember, again, I know I sound like a broken record, but it's very important if you're going to manually serialize a class or object sequentially, you have to read it back the exact same way that you wrote it. So ID, name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, references, the way that I wrote it with println, has to be the way that I read it. ID, name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, and references, respectively. We're using a little bit of nesting here, and I don't want to retain the old ID value. However, it is, it is in the file. It's a line in the file. So I have to kind of just, kind of throw it away or consume that line. So I read that, I consume it. But the reason is this is more of an import function than an add function. We're not sure. It's dynamic. There might be 10 objects, there might be 5, there might be 50 objects currently in the database. But if we load a single object, we want to tack it on or add it to the objects that are already there. We don't want to write over something accidentally that, or unintentionally that we, would regret losing. Okay, so instead of utilizing 0, there may already be an object, but I'm just importing a new person with ID. So I have to count. I get a record count. I count how many records there are, and then I'm going to move it to the next record or tack that on to the current objects in the database. Okay, so it may have been 0, but then I save that one person, and then later I have, maybe let's say that I have 10 people in my database and I want to import Charles Germany. Well, he's number 11, okay? But I haven't overwritten any of the previous items. So we have to read it to consume that character, to go to the next line, since that's our delimiter, but we don't want to actually set the value of ID to be what we read from the file. Instead, we're going to make the value of ID the next record after we've counted all the records up here, okay? And then everything else, we're just nesting. This is straightforward, pretty simple. It's just, I'll call read line on the buffer reader object, and that comes in as a string. It all comes in as a string. So the string data is very straightforward. That's all we have to do is call n read line. Now the numerical data, again, we've got to parse it. This comes in as a string, so we have to nest it and convert it to an integer or convert it to a double, respectively. And then again, for the same reason, we have to make sure that we close our objects. We don't want to leave them open if we don't need them open. But since there are 4 objects here, there were 3 objects to close, okay? And that's it for a standard object, so why don't we test it out? And again, we'll run the program. And if we look at the people in our database, let's go ahead and do that. So I'll call display, and there's 0 people in the database, okay? So 0 people in the database. Let's go back to the main menu. Let's load a person. Enter name of person to load. All right, I'm going to type in my name. Importing new person with ID of 0, right? So it's the first person in the database because we haven't added anybody yet. File loaded successfully, and now were I to display a person, there are 1 people in the database. Current record 1, named Charles Germany. Okay? And there I am. So there is our, that's serializing a single object, saving a single class object sequentially. Next, we'll look at arrays. Now let's take a look at reading and writing arrays of objects sequentially. Now that we've taken a look at saving a single object and loading it sequentially, let's take a look at saving an entire array of objects and loading them sequentially. So first we're going to call save person sequential, which we'll call this function down here, save person sequential array. So let's warp over to it in the navigator pane, save person sequential array. And it's a very similar process to what we did as far as saving a single object, but the difference is we have to put it inside of a for loop. Instead of a single object and doing this only once, we're going to do this for the entire length of the array. Remember that the length in this case is 100. There's 100 person objects in the array. So we're going to loop in this for loop 100 times. Again, just as a little bit of caution, we're going to make sure the object's not null. And then we're going to go through and we're going to save. We'll use using a line as a delimiter, ID, name, age, size, weight, occupation, location, and references. So basically, every 8 lines will denote a single record. There'll be 100 rows, and there'll be 8 columns per row if you choose to think of it that way. Or if we wanted to, we could recode it as a 2-dimensional array, rows and columns. So, but 8 of these lines composes one single record, right? One person object. So other than the for loop, nothing has changed much here in terms of the way we save the object. We still need a file object, a file output stream object, and a print stream object, and we simply print line or print just as we would if we were sending text to the console with system out print. We need to close our objects. We don't want to leave them open if we don't need to. We need to make sure we catch our IO exception. So let's test that out. We'll try it. And we need to populate or instantiate some objects real quick. So I'm just going to do some names here. Let's see. Alright, and then I'll just do X, Y, and Z. Alright, so X. And Z. We'll just add, so there'll be 4 people in the database when we get done. Alright, so now let's take a look at that. There are 4 people in the database. We'll cycle through them. So first one, record 1, Charles, Germany. Record 2, X. 3, Y. 4, Z. And then that comes to the end. Alright, so let's get out of here. Respectively, again, we'll walk backwards. There's the last record. If I were to try to go past that, hey, no person to display at position 5. Okay, can't go past that. Into the array, no further. Alright, let's go to the previous. There's 4, 3, 2, 1. So Z, Y, X, and then Charles, Germany, and then beginning of the array. Alright, so we just wanted you to see there's 4 objects there. Alright, let's leave, and now we're going to save an entire array. We'll input 0, and we'll sequentially save an entire array of person objects. So 0. Save all people, entire array has been completed. Let's quit, and let's go take a look at the file. Alright, so I'm going to close this, hopping over to our directory, and notice, we told it to call this one data1.text array. Since it's an array, entire array of objects, we're not, taking the, saving a single person here. This is a single person, but this was an entire array. So here's our 4 objects. There's Charles, Germany, right? There's X, there's Y, there's Z. And then the rest of these were uninitialized. They're just the default values. So we just kind of padded out that file there. There's an entire array. Now, what about loading it? Alright, let's go back to main and let's take a look at loading. If that's saving an entire array, how would you load an entire array sequentially? Well, let's go and take a look at that, and that would be load person sequential array. So it's very similar to the way we saved a single object. Not much has changed there, but again, the difference is that things need to be inside of a for loop, because we have to take not one object, but every single object in the array. And again, we've also got to do some parsing or some converting. And in this example, since we're not importing a single object, but we're reading the entire database, right? We're loading the entire database, then we're just going to set the ID to whatever it was in the file. We don't have to worry about reordering things or rearranging things like we did when we were just importing one object and we weren't sure how many objects the user had already put in that database, and so therefore it was sort of an uncertainty or sort of a dynamic value. This is a set value here. We're just reading 100 objects in, and we're going to set it to be the ID. So it's very straightforward. And don't have to do anything with the string values, but we have to parse the integer and the double values and things. But that's it. So make sure we close our objects when we're done. And let's take a look again. We'll just see how that works. So, the same thing, but we're just kind of iterating or repeating things in a for loop for the length or the number of elements stored within the array. So I'm going to enter 1 this time, and that will load the entire array. Load all people, entire array. Remember, there were 4 objects, so let's go ahead and call display. Now there are 4 people in the database, and there they are. And we'll just cycle through. There's Charles, Germany, there's X, there's Y, there's Z, and I'll just cycle back. There's Z, Y, X, Charles, Germany. So, again, just an example of how you would do file access for saving and serializing a single object sequentially and entire arrays of objects. Both saving or writing and loading or reading.